Do you know that 90% of boys and 70% of girls are exposed to pornography online? Meanwhile, 71% of kids say that they're hiding internet activity from their parents. In 56% of divorce cases today, a major contributing factor is one spouse's continued use of inappropriate content online. What are you doing to protect your family online? Covenant Eye's Internet Accountability monitors how the internet is used on your family's mobile devices and their computers. Each web page visited is rated similar to TV shows or video games, like T for teen or M for mature. This information is collected in easy-to-read reports, and as a parent, you can receive weekly reports for your kids. Plus, you can invite your friends to receive reports for your internet activity, which enables you to enjoy the benefits of accountability and protection online as well. These reports provide you with a comprehensive view of how the internet is used in your home. They include information like the videos that are watched and words typed into search engines. Are you looking for additional protection? Covenant Eyes also provides internet filtering, which blocks inappropriate content and limits the amount of time spent online. Install Covenant Eyes on all your devices, your computers, phones, and tablets. There's no extra charge, and we provide free customer support. It's that simple. Sign up today. It's your turn to protect yourself and your family online.
Phil, hey, it's great to see you. How you doing?
Doing great, Dave.
Great. Hey, one of the reasons why we asked you to be on today is really it's a personal story. In 2011, I was right where you're at in the headquarters of the Wesleyan Church at a meeting, hearing all these young leaders talk about how there's no leadership development in their districts and all that stuff. So I went out to the parking lot, and do you remember I gave you a call and said, man, just thank you for everything that you're doing?
I do remember that.
Well, obviously it was a pivotal phone call in your life, and so so we're messing around with you.
Actually affirmed what we were doing, so that was great.
Yeah, it really, one of the things that's going on in the Pacific Southwest District is this pipeline of leadership, and you're really the architect behind that. And so one of the reasons why we asked you to be on today is because on a district level, so on a large organization, you were able to design this pipeline for leadership development. And for missional discipleship, for discipling people, your next leaders are very important. So we wanted to ask you, can you just tell our viewers today a little bit about what that pipeline looks like?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Actually, one thing I want to say from the very beginning is that I really do buy into that concept that I'm sure many of the listeners and the viewers have heard, which is everything rises and falls on leadership. And that's a statement that I really truly believe in. And so in order to kind of unpack that in our situation, we started actually to run along two rails. The first one was to develop our existing leaders, our pastors, specifically our lead pastors in leadership. And so we started what we call the Leadership Connection. We gather 8 times a year, actually. It's kind of based around the pastor's calendar. January through May, we don't do the summer. Then we do September, October, then November, December, we're done. Those are just busy, busy times in the life of pastors. And that is designed to do leadership development. It's designed to have peer learning, share life, and just talk about those kinds of things that are pertinent for our ministries. Even the lessons that I might bring on leadership or ministry skill sets are really designed around conversation more than lecture. So those have proven to be very effective. The other rail is to develop those who are not yet in a lead role, but what we would call the Emerging Leader Network, which is what you called about that day. And basically we decided to start developing, if we could, a deep bullpen, if you please, a deep farm system for our future. And we kind of build it off the premise that the leaders that we work with in the ELN, or the Emerging Leader Network, are not the leaders of tomorrow, but they're leaders of today who will set the pace for tomorrow. And so we started identifying those who are 35 years, sometimes we'll fudge up to 40 actually, but ideally 35 years of age or younger, who are at some level preparing for ministry. And there are folks that we consider either potential planters or lead pastors. And we decided to start meeting with them, and initially it was a 12-month process. We've actually morphed it now to about 15 months, and it's a combination of leadership development around 9 core ministry competencies that we feel that all those in ministry need to have. And once again, it's designed around doing life together. It's designed around conversational interaction as far as just lecture. And we always include the spouses as much as we can. And so that's kind of a brief overview of running around down the 2 rails of developing our existing leaders constantly and then developing the leaders for future.
Awesome. Well, let me sort of run down the pipeline a little bit of what it is our district has, and that is we have the emerging leaders, like you mentioned. These are the ones that aren't necessarily leading today but will be leading in the future. Leadership Connection, that's for senior pastors. And then one of the things that really you and Pastor Steve Babby have added have been the coaching of new pastors and then also discipling pastors. So can you tell us a little bit about how this has helped to build a culture and what has it done for churches in our district?
Well, I think one of the things that we've discovered is a lot of pastors don't actually have not themselves been discipled. And of course, it's difficult to disciple others if you haven't been discipled, just like it's difficult to lead if you have not yet been led. And so when we discovered that, we thought, what is a way that we can really at some level organically and more through a process and a program of developing our pastors. So actually in connection with one of our guys on the district, Brian Craig, who really helped me to understand this. We just started what we call the disciple making leadership connect communities, and these are pastors who get together primarily online, and it's for about a year. Actually, they meet weekly, and they actually get discipled relationally and through different processes. And as a result of that, all that we do when we pour into leaders actually is designed to have them turn around and pour into others. Obviously, we cannot connect effectively with everybody, but if we pour into the right people, we believe they'll pour into their people, their people in the chairs or in the pews, and they'll pour into their staff if such applies. And so we are trying to, again, engage all of our pastors. In fact, one of our goals is to have all of our pastors be in a disciple-making leadership community for a season. And we're very much in the very beginning parameters of that. I've had a handful of folks go through that. I actually went through that myself with Brian as the facilitator of that. And I got to be honest with you, it literally changed my life as far as working with leaders and pastors. I realized that once you yourself have been in a situation where you can be discipled yourself, and outgrowth of that has come a lot of the things in my own personal life I begin to trying to develop, and also what we're trying to do as part of our particular movement in the Pacific Southwest.
Well, that's great. Phil, I know that deeply embedded in your DNA is a DNA of multiplication. How is developing leaders helping with multiplication on the district?
Well, it actually really informs it quite a bit. One of our phrases that we use is to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches, because we believe as we multiply more disciples, they will become leaders, and out of leaders will come churches. And ultimately, it's about expanding the kingdom through faith communities. And so we believe if we can get this pipeline going with disciples and leaders, we're going to have more faith communities all throughout our particular part of God's kingdom in the Pacific Southwest. And we're going to see extraordinary things happen, especially as we create space for leaders to function in the way that God is directing them. One of the things that we also are really hammering our leaders with is the simple 3 words of be brave, to be open, be ready, and be brave. And we're challenging our leaders to be open to God, to hear the voice of God, to be ready to discern what God is saying, and then to be brave to act on what they are discerning. And as a result of that, we are seeing incredible things happen both in existing churches and even as we push out the parameters of new faith communities around the movement. So leadership informs all of that at every level.
Well, Phil, I have another question for you. We're talking about how mission and discipleship intermingle. And I guess the question is, well, why is leadership development so important when we're talking about missional discipleship, leaders going on mission?
Well, I think again, it informs in the sense that if leaders lead, that's what it comes down to, and leaders who lead and they understand the Great Commission and the spirit of the Great Commandment, they are going to continually push the fringes of what is God is calling them to do, and so it becomes missional. If you define the most simplistic way of missional being going out, of engaging culture, not just inviting culture into your particular building or part of your environment, but it's pushing the parameters. Leadership makes all the difference in that because, again, leaders lead, leaders innovate, leaders try things, leaders are willing to fail. And so by developing our leadership and then freeing them to be open to what God is calling them to be about doing, they're going to be on mission because at some level they cannot not be on mission. And they're going to begin to push those parameters. And as you expand their leadership capacity, you expand their mission or their missional capacity as well. At least that's my opinion anyway.
We have some questions coming in, Phil, and for me, just watching you from a distance, being that you're in California and I'm in Indiana, I definitely am impacted by just how you lead and what you say. You actually live this out. So I just want those watching knowing that it's not just something you preach or teach, but this is actually something that comes out of your being. And with that, there's a question. There's a difference between character and also competency, and you have to have both. And a lot of things you're talking about is that going, kind of that competency. We have a pastor, Doug Morley, says, what are the 9 core competencies for pastoral leaders? So
the one, is he referring to the ones that we use for our young leaders, I'm assuming?
Yeah, yep.
For that. Okay. Obviously, I wish I knew those just boom off the top of my head. But here are the core competencies, if he'll allow me just to kind of refresh that, is basically is this. It's spiritual disciplines, it's self-leadership, it's serving others, it's leadership style, it's relating to others, communication, lifelong learning, developing leaders, and growing and multiplying ministry. And the 2 key areas that we start with, I believe, are the character issues, are of course, the spiritual disciplines or spiritual formation. You have to, as a leader, have to know how to be spiritually formed and to be following Christ. And then, of course, self-leadership. The most difficult person to lead, and we've heard this before, is ourselves. So we start foundationally with those 2 core competencies. And also, along with each core competency, are questions. One core question that we provide for them. The idea being that if they could have a question that they could ask themselves every day of their ministry life, regardless of how things change and develop, they will be able to monitor at some level their progress in certain areas. So, for example, in spiritual disciplines, again, which is a character issue in my opinion, is they simply ask the question, what am I doing to continually connect with God? And even though your connectional points might change over your ministry life or your life as a Christ follower, then you're still asking yourself, what am I doing to connect with God? So those are the 9 core competencies. I know I hit those pretty quickly, but the 2 most important ones, spiritual discipline, self-leadership, I believe are the character issues. And you can have all kinds of competency, but if it's not built on character, then of course you're going to be limited in how far your competencies will take you.
Good point. Jess Holmes, who's with us, says, how many pastors are actually natural born leaders?
Well, here that comes back to the age-old conversation between are leaders made or are they born?
Yeah.
And I would say this: I think all people can develop their leadership capacity. I don't think anybody is naturally born a leader. Now, some people are born with some capacities that are more naturally bent towards leadership. Yeah. Some of them have to do with their personality. Some have to do with just some of their natural skill set. But I guess what the premise that we build off is that everybody can be ramped up in their leadership capabilities. So we believe leaders are made, they're not born, although we recognize that some people are born with, frankly, more of some leadership capacity, but that doesn't mean that people that are not naturally born that way with certain capacities or personality prototypes that people can't be developed, because leaders come in all shapes and sizes and all kinds of personalities, and we try to leverage that as much as possible. And again, we build off of that one other, again, nothing that's going to be new to, I think, most people viewing, is leadership is influence. Everybody has influence.
Yep.
Well, we're not trying to say that this is the system to use for your district or your church or whatever, but it is the system that Pastor Phil here has developed. So, but Phil, I'd ask you this question. What would you say to districts who say, we're not doing much leadership development wise, we want to start investigating and moving down that path? What would you tell them? Where do they start? How do they start getting their feet wet?
Well, I'm gonna actually share something that I stole from Dan Ryland, and so
Good guy to steal from.
Yeah, it is. I think so. So, and I want to indicate that I actually gave the guy credit. So it's very important. And so, actually, here it is. The very basic. If you're doing nothing to develop leaders, here's where you start. You find a good book, you gather some people, and you ask good questions. There you go. You start right there. So find a good book on leadership, gather some pastors around you, and then get together and ask good questions regarding that book and application of that book. And that's the beginning right there.
Yeah, I was in a leadership group with Dan, and he said the same thing, and I thought, wow, 12 Stones process is that simple, and it works. It's so great. So,
and I'm also glad I gave him credit now because wow, that guy's alive.
I definitely would have called you on that. I definitely would have called you on that.
We got another question from Bill Howe. He says, developing lay leaders wants to know what first leadership trait I should emulate from Christ. So what's a leadership trait that you would say someone should emulate from Christ? And there's a lot of them, but what would you say are definitely maybe top 3?
Boy, actually, I want to say that's a great question, and I don't know if I have any kind of an answer, except for as I think back in the life of Christ and how I've tried to kind of grab a hold of some of the key things. Obviously, one of the things would be servant leader, and I think a servant leadership different than sometimes we define it. I guess one of the best definitions I've heard of servant leadership was that a servant leader is someone who is willing to do anything, but not pressured into doing everything. And so I think that is a key area of Christ's life. I think the fact that he modeled what he taught to his disciples, and then he was not asking them to do anything that he himself was not willing to do. So I guess the servant leadership, modeling, and then I guess the third one would be more of an outflow of modeling than just doing what you are going to ask others to do.
Well, Phil, we want to thank you for your time. We want to ask you, what's a good way for folks to get a hold of you if they've got some questions, or maybe they could tweet at you on social media? We know you do that.
Well, obviously, my email is simply phil@pswdistrict.com, and we'd love to hear from folks. And then at Phil Stevenson is my Twitter handle. So that would be, I guess, 2 main areas right there. And if anything that I can do at any level that help add some value to what districts or movements may want to do to develop leadership, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with anybody about that. So I appreciate the opportunity just to share what we're learning. And we have a long way to go, but we're learning as we go.
Well,
appreciate you.
Yeah, we appreciate you. Want to thank you for that time. Folks watching online, definitely take him up on that. We want to throw it now over to Tony and Heath for some wonderful commentary.